Right, so I would say it's pretty well universally acknowledged that the problem with home generation, whether wind or solar or whatever, is the storage, because you generate when it's sunny but you need it when it's night. There's a difference between when you generate and when you use it, and because of that you need to be able to store it so you can use it on demand rather than having to use it when you produce it. And this is a problem for grid scale, of course. Grid scale doesn't have nearly the same issues because of the land that they can use. 95% of American energy is stored via pumped hydro. You pump the water up a hill and you let it go when you need it and you drive a turbine, which is just great if you happen to have your own mountain and your own reservoir. Try doing that in your backyard and you have quite a challenge. So what grid can do and what home can do are very different. With home-based installations, until now, or until recently, you've been pretty much limited to batteries. And the problem with batteries, of course, is they represent an enormous cost of the installation, and they are basically not that good, lasting about 3 years or so. It's been such an issue that folks have been looking at it and a way to create a method that we could do at the home scale that becomes very viable. And a lot of people have been looking into hydrogen generation through electrolysis. The idea is you use that electrical energy and you generate your hydrogen. You store your hydrogen and then you can burn it in a motor, so you've got it on demand. Of course, the problem with that really is, what do you do with the hydrogen? Because it's a very explosive gas. And industry really has two options available, that's liquefaction and compression. Options like absorption are being played with and experimented with, but it still remains those two as being the way of doing it. In fact, industry gets most of its hydrogen from the cracking of methane rather than electrolysis. But we've got electrolysis because we've got solar cells or wind. Now, the electrolysis of water is a great favourite. You make a salty water, you electrolyse it, or maybe you can chuck some urea or ammonia in there, and you improve the electrolysis. But it's still far from satisfactory, with corrosion of the cell being a big issue, and that's been the state of play for quite a while. But there are 4 techniques that have come up in the last couple of years. They're extremely interesting and lend themselves to home scale much more than anything else. And the first one is the use of potassium borate. Potassium borate will form potassium borohydride under hydrogen pressure. So essentially, you create your hydrogen, you put it into a vessel with some borate, the borate will absorb the hydrogen and become potassium hydroborate. The curious thing of potassium hydroborate, which is kind of a coffee-coloured mixture, is when you throw it into water, it hydrolyzes. What that means is it grabs all of the oxygen out of the water, releasing more hydrogen than you put in there because you've got the hydrogen of the water, and it forms potassium borate, exactly what you started with. So it's a closed loop system. And of course you take that borate and you stick it back in your hydrogen chamber that you've got from your electrolysis, and you're able to have a safe storage mechanism for the storage of your hydrogen. So it's an extremely interesting way of storing hydrogen. The other methodology is very cool, actually. It's the formate bicarbonate cycle. It's a really well-known cycle that if you take formic acid and heat it, it'll release a lot of hydrogen and a lot of CO2. Now that's an awful lot of CO2 going to the atmosphere, but if it's an alkali metal formate, so like potassium formate for instance, and you heat that, then that will form potassium bicarbonate. If you use sodium formate, you'll form sodium bicarbonate, which is of course the stuff you put in cakes. And that reaction between the formate and the bicarbonate can be reversed really easily. In fact, they go either way. They go either way on a catalyst, and the catalyst is favoured is titanium dioxide at the moment actually, and nitrogen altered carbon surfaces will do exactly that. So you get a cycle between the two of them, and they are able to go one way or other dependent only on the pressure of hydrogen and the temperature. And we're not talking about massive temperatures, we're talking about 80 degrees centigrade. So you're able to do this by using the energy that you create through your solar to heat a bed, electrolyse your hydrogen, pump the hydrogen in there, and that formate bicarbonate cycle will be repeated around and around. Now, I love those two because it's a safe storage of hydrogen, but you're still relying on the electrolysis. One of the things that's come out recently that for me is an all-star, it's absolutely fascinating, it's called ETAC. ETAC is a two-stage process because normally in electrolysis then you're producing the hydrogen and the oxygen at the same time. You apply a current to your anode and your cathode, you get hydrogen off of one and oxygen off the other. ETAC splits that up. It has one plate where the hydrogen is formed and another plate containing nickel hydroxide. When you electrolyse it, that nickel hydroxide changes to nickel oxyhydroxide and the hydrogen is given off and you can collect it and maybe use a storage system that we talked about. Then when you raise the temperature of the nickel oxyhydroxide, it gives off oxygen and goes right back to nickel hydroxide. So it separates those two into an electrical component and a thermal component, but it creates a reversible cycle that's able to electrolyse the water into first hydrogen and then heat it, second oxygen. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. The fourth one is instead of electrolysing a water mixture, just take some good old liquid ammonia and electrolyse that. And then you get an awful lot of hydrogen out that way. Of course, these systems where you've got the electrolysis combined with the storage is something that we could be building at the home scale, which is what I thought was tremendously relevant about them. Now, they're not esoteric processes. These are companies who are using these techniques right now to create and store hydrogen in a new and fascinating way. And that, of course, creates an energy store for us that we can store safely at home, release when we want to release it, and suddenly we are removed from the slavery of batteries. I was trying to think of another way of saying that, but I couldn't. So I thought I'd make you aware of these four technologies and that they're actually out there. If you're interested in them, and dig a little deeper into them, particularly the ETAC, which to me seems a really easy way of doing it. And to be honest, as far as home storage is concerned, a bit of a game changer. So I thought I would share that with you. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and please do remember to like and subscribe.